I think the first cross-examination is to be carried out by the Convoy organizers. So who's going to be doing this? Okay, so Mr. Miller, you're on. You have 20 minutes if you need it, and given that Commission Council has gone a bit over time, I even give you a little bit of leeway, but not very much.
So good morning. Ms. Li, I'd like to start with you if that's okay. So, Ms. Li, I understand you're 21 years of age, is that correct?
I'm now 22.
Now 22. And at the time of the events in question, being January and February of this year, you were 21.
Correct.
All right. And you said already you're a public servant. You work for the Government of Canada?
Yes, that's correct.
And you worked for the Government of Canada during the protest period. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And what do you do for your employment for the Government of Canada?
I'm a data analyst.
And with which ministry or department are you with?
Objection. What's the relevance to this line of question, Commissioner?
I'm not sure it's relevant or not, but it seems to me that it's not unreasonable.
Well, I personally don't feel there's, the actions I took was in my capacity as an individual citizen of Ottawa and not related to my work or any other activities.
Right, I understand that, but what department were you with and what were you doing for work for the Government of Canada at the time?
I was a data analyst with Shared Services Canada.
Shared Services Canada?
Correct.
Okay. And what ministry does that come under?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I understand that you know Ottawa City Councillor Catherine McKenney, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And I also understand that you know NDP member of Provincial Parliament for Ottawa Centre, Joel Harden, is that correct?
Correct.
And from some public articles, I also understand that you were introduced to lawyer Mr. Paul Champ sometime between January 28th, 2022 and February 4th, 2022. Is that correct?
Could you repeat the dates, please?
January 28th, 2022 and February 4th, 2022.
Correct.
Okay. And what date were you introduced to Mr. Champ?
I believe it was a Friday, so whichever date that Friday fell on.
Okay. And so someone introduced you to Mr. Champ, correct?
Mr. Champ had reached out to me.
Okay. And is it not true that it was Ottawa City Councillor Catherine McKenney who put you in touch with Mr. Champ?
That is untrue.
Okay. And I understand that you were the recent co-chair of the 2002 Leaders Summit for Action Chinese Canadians Together. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as part of that summit, I understand you gave a video statement about how you became who you are today. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And it focused on the protest in Ottawa and becoming the lead plaintiff in the class action that you filed. Is that right?
Correct.
And there you describe becoming the lead plaintiff in the class action as a fateful and surreal story. Is that right?
Correct.
And you said there you had the opportunity to make a difference, right?
Correct.
And you said that the lawyers needed a plaintiff.
Correct.
Right. And so you were asked to be the lead plaintiff. Is that fair?
Correct.
Right. And was there any other else other than Mr. Champ who was asking you to be the lead plaintiff?
Emily Tamman, who works with Paul Champ.
All right. And so Mr. Champ reached out to you randomly. How did Mr. Champ get in touch with you?
It was as a result of the meeting I had organized with the Ottawa Police. One of my fellow residents and neighbor was a lawyer who was aware of the action being taken.
Okay. And so I just want to take you back as well to that speech you gave with the Leaders Summit for Action for Chinese Canadians Together. Just let me know if this is correct, what you said. This is how you described the protest. It was insane. It was the strangest Twilight Zone purge scenario where people weren't quite purging, but the opportunity was there because there was just no laws being enforced. So it was this crazy, crazy thing with hot tubs, with right-wing extremists, and then right-wing moderates as well. And then you just your confused average grandmother saying, "Oh, isn't this really a great time? I wonder what the air raid sirens are for." Those are your statements, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And when you say purge scenario, for the folks at home as well as anybody here, I take it you're referring to the film series, The Purge, right?
Yes, just in reference to the lack of laws that were in place.
Right. And it was your belief that the protests provided a purge opportunity. Is that fair?
I would not say that the protest or occupation provided a purge opportunity, but what I witnessed on the streets day to day was very reminiscent of that kind of lawless world where open fires were being held, laws were being broken in front of police officers who were not doing anything to combat them, and just a general sense and lack of disregard for public areas and really the people that lived there.
Okay. But again, you said earlier and you admitted that you stated it was the strangest Twilight Zone purge scenario where people weren't quite purging, but the opportunity was there, correct?
Yes,
Right. So you believe that the opportunity was there for a purge type scenario. Is that right?
I believe the opportunity was there, and it was an environment where these people who had been illegally occupying our streets felt that they had I don't know if this is the right word, they had the ability to do anything they wanted, as they were not privy to the regulations that the rest of us members of society were. And I came to this conclusion through my witnessing of these crimes being committed, because really they were crimes. And even speaking with these individuals directly who had informed me that they were not going to face any consequences because they were protected.
Okay. So in the movie The Purge, you agree that it's about that for one day in the United States, called The Purge, that there are no laws in force and the population can commit murder, which is the purge. Is that right?
That is correct, but I was not referencing the entirety of the purge. It was a purge-like scenario where laws were not enforced specifically.
And a purge opportunity was available.
Yes, because laws were not being enforced.
Right. So people could potentially commit murder. That was your concern.
I did not make that statement.
All right. And you then, I understand from your evidence that you've provided to the commission prior, from your statement, I understand that you started to hear honking on Friday, January 28th, right? Or January 28th, 2022.
Correct.
All right. And when you provided the statement to the commission, did you provide it yourself?
Yes.
They interviewed you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that you obtained the injunction on February 5th, 2022.
I think it's February 4th.
February 4th, 2022, you obtained the injunction to stop the honking, is that right?
Pardon me, the 7th. Pardon me, February 7th.
Well,
The
there was-
injunction was obtained and approved by the court on the 7th.
Well, I understand there was an interim injunction approved for first 2 days, then on the 7th it was approved. Is that the correct facts, or would? Mr.
No, that is
Catlett-
not correct. 2 days prior to the injunction being put in place, there was a deferral of the trial to that date where the injunction was eventually approved.
Trial. You said trial. I just want to clarify for the record. There was no trial. It was an application, correct?
Application, sorry, I'm not well-versed in law. I'm not a law student.
I understand. And then after you obtained the injunction, I understand that things got a little bit better, right?
For a brief period, shortly after the injunction, there was a clear silence from the noise that was previously constant. Shortly thereafter, there was a gradual ramp up in the honking again, but however, it was more strategic and intermittent than it was previously, whereas it was constant.
Okay, and so you said you gave your statement to the commission before you testified here today, right?
Yes?
And when you gave your statement, you knew you had to be truthful?
Yes?
And when you gave that statement, of course, you wanted to include all important observations and interactions that you had with the protesters, is that right?
I just want to clarify the statement being in reference, is that?
Sorry, I should clarify. She gave an anticipated statement, so it's a statement of anticipated evidence, not a witness statement. So it's not attributable to her, it's attributable to the commission, And that is different from a witness statement, which is attributable to the witness.
Right.
So I just want to clarify that.
Sure. And so when you provided the commission your statement, I take it that you would have told them all the important information that you wanted them to know?
As far as I was aware, yes, to the best of my ability.
Right. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner. I do want to interject here. Our rules provide that there can be no examination on a statement of anticipated evidence without leave. And I think leave needs to be sought if there's going to be questions about that.
okay, I won't put the statement to her. I'll move on. I understand that you noticed the honking generally stop after the injunction was granted, though some trucks still honked intermittently for short periods of time. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And so that's what happened after the injunction. Is that correct?
To the best of my recollection, correct. That was the immediate aftermath.
All right. Now, between January 28th and February 5th, 2022, did you attend your employment at the Government of Canada?
I was working from home, though I struggled to maintain productivity due to the disturbances that were taking place.
Right. And at the Government of Canada, I take it that you are on salary. Is that fair?
That is correct.
So between January 28th, 2022 and February 5th, 2022, you did not lose any income. Is that fair?
That would be correct. There was a leave code that was applied for government employees that were affected by the situation.
Okay. But prior to the situation as well, you were working from home. Wasn't that also under the general COVID policy for all Government of Canada employees?
Could you clarify the question, please?
So weren't you working from home prior to January 28th, 2022 anyway?
Yes.
Okay. And how long were you working from home from?
I had started a new position on January 10th with Shared Services Canada. Prior to that, I was employed working from home with another agency.
Okay. And what agency were you employed with before?
I was employed with the Canada Revenue Agency.
Okay, Canada Revenue Agency. And so from January 28th, 2022 and before, you were already working at home?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And moving on from sort of your background with working from home, I understand that you had the interactions with the protesters and you confronted them on Kent Street. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. And when you confronted those protesters, do you remember saying to them, which was recorded, go back to where the fuck you were from?
I may have said that.
Okay. And I take it that you never saw any of the, or never said to the commission or saw any protesters or truckers physically harm anyone, is that right?
There was only the, I would describe it as intimidation with a truck.
Okay. And you never said to the commission, and nothing in that regard with respect to seeing protesters or truckers threatening to physically harm anyone either, did you?
I did not make that statement.
All right. And you didn't say to the commission or see anything in your observations that could be classified as espionage or sabotage?
I'm sorry?
You didn't see anything that could be classified as espionage or sabotage?
No.
Thank you. And you didn't say to the commission or observe any of the protesters or truckers destroy or light a fire any buildings or anything like that?
Not inside of any buildings, no, just outside.
Outside. So you're saying that they were destroying the outside of buildings? Is
I
that
did
right?
not say that. I said they were lighting fires outside of buildings, as in the bonfires that were all over the city.
Right, but they weren't trying to knock down any form of buildings or property or anything like that?
I can't comment to their intentions.
Well, I understand their intentions, but I submit you didn't see them do anything like that.
Nope, I just saw the fires, open fires.
Great, and you didn't see them try to destroy any other trucks or vehicles or light them afire or anything?
I did not.
Thank you. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about that class action as well. So you became the lead plaintiff on February 4th when it was filed, correct?
Correct.
All right. And as of today, I understand there are only 3 other additional plaintiffs to that action, is that right?
Correct.
And the first one is Happy Goat Coffee Company, is that correct?
Correct.
And Happy Goat Coffee Company is a chain of coffee shops that has 3 coffee shops in the downtown area, is that fair?
As far as I know, correct.
Thank you. And the second plaintiff is, that got added, is a numbered company, but it operates as Union Local 613, and I understand that's a restaurant and bar on Somerset Street. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And the third plaintiff is a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Devani, is that right?
Correct.
And he's a bartender and server at a restaurant in Byward Market.
My understanding is that he was employed in the Byward Market.
Okay. And that he doesn't live in downtown Ottawa, though?
Yes.
Okay. And so after you got the injunction on February 5th, I understand that both yourself and Mr. Champ began to offer the protesters and truckers an agreement that they could sign to be released from your class action if they agreed to leave. Do you remember that?
I would like to clarify that the injunction was granted on the 7th.
Okay, but on the beginning of the 5th as well, as I understand, you began to offer this release to the protesters and truckers. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And so who was it that you had going out, handing out copies of this release to the truckers? Do you remember?
I am not aware of that information.
Okay. Did you know that Councillor McKenney was handing them out for you?
Now I do.
Okay. And now you do for me telling you, or did you know before this?
Well, it was a lot of events, and I think it was mentioned that McKenney was out doing this. However, I was not directly involved other than agreeing to offer this agreement.
Okay. And I understand also that you know the NDP member of Provincial Parliament for Ottawa, Senator Joel Harden. Do you know him?
Yes.
Right. And he was contacting people and organizing events to raise money for your lawsuit. Do you remember that?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And was it not the Ottawa City Councillor, Catherine McKenney, an NDP member of Provincial Parliament for Ottawa, Senator Joel Harden, who supported you and put you forward for that claim? Is that not correct?
That is not correct. I've stated that that was not true previously as well.
Right. And so I just want to bring you to sort of another statement that you had said when you were at the Leaders Summit for Action for Chinese Canadians.
I would also like to clarify that the Leaders Summit has not occurred.
Right, but you gave a video.
Yes, correct.
Right. So can you agree with me that you stated the following? It came about that the lawyers needed a lead plaintiff to stand up and speak about what was going on and really try to make a difference because we weren't seeing any change in our community, which was not acceptable for anybody. But being a Chinese Canadian, it is a bit of an odd role to play because it's not something that is really necessarily supported or common within our culture. But I really saw the need for anybody to stand up and speak for the people and help us out of the situation we were in. And the stars really aligned, and here I am.
Yes, that's true.
Thank you. Those are my questions for you, Ms. Li, and then I just have a few for Ms. Lalonde.
Before you continue, would it be all right to clarify my relationship with Joel Harden and Catherine McKenney? No? Okay.
Judge, if His Honor would like, that's fine.
There'll be a brief opportunity to re-examine at the end, so.
So, Ms. Lalonde, good morning.
Good morning.
So, Ms. Lalonde, I understand just from your background, and I'm not trying to poke or anything of that, but I understand you were born around 1947 in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, is that correct?
I was born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, but grew up in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, and you've asked women their ages, so
I won't, I'm not going to. I promise not to do that.
they can do the math.
Yes, all right. And I don't want to get into too much with your disability, and I'm very sorry for the struggles that you've had, particularly during the convoy and protest. But I understand that about 1961 is when you began to lose your sight. Is that fair?
Yes,
Okay. And despite that, you thrived. You obtained a bachelor degree in psychology from the University of Saskatchewan in 1974?
that's right, yes.
Right. And you completed your law degree at the University of Saskatchewan in 1984?
1983.
83. And thereafter, you completed your Master's of Laws at the London School of Economics. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And how many jurisdictions are you a member of the bar in or a member of the solicitors group?
I was a member in good standing with the Ontario Bar and the New York Bar, but recently I resigned my membership from the Ontario Bar.
Okay.
I'm still active as a a retired member of the New York Bar, but I'm still licensed.
Right. And I understand that after becoming a member of the bar, you began to work for the Government of Canada. Is that correct?
Yes,
Right. And you spent 10 years with the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs, Canada. Is that correct?
it was more like 25 years, just let me recorrect that. It was from 1990, September 1990 to April 2011.
Okay. And then you were also with the Department of Veteran Affairs Canada, is that right?
Yes,
Okay. And around that, in the 80s, you also incorporated a company called Delaronde International Inc., is that right?
that's correct.
And that company, it's still in operation?
Yes,
And is that company not a federal government contractor?
no,
No, but it does do government contracts and assists with, I believe, a lot of First Nations work, is that right?
it could, yes.
And you worked as a lawyer for the Government of Canada, is that right?
No, I was working on the policy side of the picture. I was not a justice lawyer with the Government of Canada. I was an executive.
Okay. And I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Can you mind telling the folks what brought about your participation in this commission?
I had a phone call from the commission, from commission solicitor, asking my permission to, first of all, have a conversation about my experience, and then asking my permission if my name could be put forward as a potential witness in this commission.
Okay. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions for both of you, and have a good morning.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. So the next, I will call on the Government of Canada to briefly cross-examine.
May I just ask three questions, Your Honor? Ms. Li, you described a lawless environment during the period of the convoy occupation, I believe, in reference to my friend's questions there. Yes?
Yes.
Did that change after you obtained the anti-honking injunction on February the 7th?
No.
Did it change by February the 14th, the lawless environment that you described?
I don't recall exactly, but I would say perhaps some of it had subsided, but it was still present. If anything, it was more underlying and more desperate in a sense.
You obtained an extension of the injunction on February the 16th. Is that right?
Correct?
And you showed us photographs on February 17th and 18th, though you couldn't recall which of those two dates it was, right?
I believe it was the 17th, yes.
Okay. And was there still a lawless environment as you perceived it at that time?
Given my experience personally, I felt that was the case.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Next, I will call on the Ottawa Police.
Good morning to you both. I just have a couple of questions for you, Ms. Li. You spoke earlier this morning about the injunction. Did circumstances change after the injunction in terms of the level of threats that you were receiving from the community?
Following the injunction, I would say the level of threats increased due to the public attention that had been placed on myself and the situation. Yes.
And once that occurred, once you were receiving a higher level of threat, would you agree that you had multiple interactions with the Ottawa Police Service as a result of that?
Yes, that is correct.
You had made them aware of the threats that you were receiving?
The majority of the threats were through the internet and on certain things. However, I was receiving calls and messages to my personal devices. However, the nature of these messages, voicemails, and calls did not seem serious enough for me to make an official report. There was only one instance where there was a serious threat received by the RCMP that had been forwarded to the Ottawa Police that was investigated.
And the Ottawa Police actually attended your residence a couple of occasions as well, correct?
That is correct.
I just want to bring up one document, if you don't mind. It's OPS 30-14460. Can you see at the top of the page that this is a document dated February 9th?
Yes.
And can you see about halfway down the page, there's a subheading, Constable Islam and Constable Lemieux?
Yes.
And it appears as though there's notes under that heading in relation to the activities of those officers.
Yes.
If we could go to the next page, bullet number 3, it says, Mo and I spoke with, and then of course there's obviously a redaction, regarding the threats she has received from her involvement with the injunction related to the convoy protest and the horns. Obviously, we can see that there's a redaction here, but would you agree that on February 9th, you did in fact speak with these 2 officers from Ottawa Police Service?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And if you could look at that second sentence, it indicates she feels very supported by the OPS with this. Would you agree at this time that you had received the attention in relation to the threats from Ottawa Police Service that made you feel comfortable that they were managing that situation?
Yes.
Thank you. Those were my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next, I'll call on the Democracy Fund, Citizens for Freedom and JCCF.
Hi to both of you. I'll just have a couple of quick questions for you today. And first I'll tilt them so they're facing in the right direction. You discussed decibel levels with Commission Council during the protests. Were decibel levels ever measured inside of your apartment, Ms. Lee?
Yes, they were.
They were? By who?
Me, myself.
How did you do that?
Through decibel measuring devices downloaded onto my phone. These devices, these applications had been they had been researched to be comparable to actual physical decibel testing devices.
Can you give me the names of those applications that you used?
Off the top of my head, I believe one was called Decibel X or something along those lines.
Can I get an undertaking? Is that possible in this context? I hadn't checked.
Our rules do not provide for
Yeah, okay.
parties to request undertakings during examination.
All right, so you say you used multiple decibel apps?
There was 2, I believe it was called Decibel X. However, it's been some time.
Okay, and do you remember what exactly the decibel reading was?
The decibel readings from my memory ranged from approximately 75 decibels to at times 85 or 90.
Okay. When speaking with Commission Council earlier, you began to describe how you had been pleading with the protesters and said there's a certain frustration when the people that are supposed to help you aren't helping you. Do you recall making that statement?
Yes, I do.
Who were the people who were supposed to help you?
Those people were the Ottawa Police and Bylaw Services.
And what were they supposed to be doing?
They were, from my understanding as a resident, citizen, and taxpayer, they were supposed to be supporting us and making sure us as the public and the community feel safe and that the laws are upheld.
And what laws did you feel weren't being upheld?
There were issues with noise, idling, parking, etc., illegal fireworks, illegal fires, public urination, public defecation, harassment on the streets, soup kitchens.
And there just wasn't any enforcement in your mind of those laws prohibiting those behaviors?
A lot of the time, I had spoken to officers directly. I had made calls to bylaws specifically detailing the incidences that were occurring. In one such occasion, I described fireworks in the vicinity of gasoline and other open fires, as well as things like alcohol and drugs. So that, to me, presented a safety issue, and therefore I reported it. However, as a result of my report, nothing came to it, and I was informed that the officers on the ground were to keep things safe despite the reality of the situation.
So in essence, the complaints that you made didn't result in enforcement?
No.
And you mentioned that you obtained an injunction in the context of your class action lawsuit that prohibited honking, and that for a time after the injunction was granted, the honking diminished, but it returned after
Yes.
a time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And would it be fair to say that it returned after a time because your injunction wasn't being enforced?
I would say that I can't speak to exactly why it occurred, but I would feel that enforcement would be a contributing factor.
Did you see any enforcement of your injunction?
No.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next is the Ottawa Coalition. Any examination there?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I just have a few questions for both of you. Ms. Delaronde, can you just confirm approximately how long have you been living in downtown Ottawa?
30 years.
And have you experienced or observed other protests or demonstrations in downtown Ottawa?
I've observed other protests in downtown Ottawa, but closer to Parliament Hill. They did not come to where I was living, never.
Thank you. You told us, Ms. Delaronde, about being concerned about wearing headphones or earplugs, about knocks on your door, about smoke alarm, or not, maybe not hearing smoke alarms. Why did you have that particular concern?
I was concerned because there was this smell, and I was informed as well about gas spills on the street, that there was open bonfires, that they were roasting food out a few meters from my building. So there was such a potential for a fire, a huge fire, and an explosion. So I was concerned that if I could actually get those earplugs to work, then I wouldn't hear if my smoke alarm went off or if people were pounding on my door to say, evacuate, evacuate.
And Ms. Delaronde, you told us a bit about the diesel fumes. Was that diesel fumes that you would just smell outside on the street, or did you smell them in your apartment?
It was very strong in my apartment. It permeated drapes, blinds, bedding, carpet. It had the whole unit had a dull, gaseous odor about it.
Did you do anything about that after the protests were over?
Yes, I got eventually worked toward getting them cleaned, all of them.
Ms. Delaronde, you told us a bit about the honking and how you experienced that. After the protests were over, what was your experiences with honking sounds?
Anytime I heard a honk of a horn, and particularly of a large vehicle horn, I could feel it sort of ripple through my body, and I would feel that my nerves were still frayed.
In the immediate days and weeks after the end of the demonstrations, what was your experiences with horns?
Very much like that I kept hearing them like phantom horns. I kept hearing them in my head. I also had phantom smells too.
And by phantom smells or horns, I mean they're not there, but that's what
They're not there.
Thank you, Ms. Delaronde. Ms. Li, I just have a few questions for you. There were some questions put to you about Councillor McKenney and a member of Provincial Parliament, Mr. Hardin. Had you ever had any interactions with them or met them prior to the class action being commenced?
No, I had not. Perhaps in passing on the street, but nothing, they didn't know who I was.
And there were some questions put to you about the injunction and what impact it had on the horns. On the day of the injunction argument of Monday, February the 7th, were you observing that hearing?
Yes, I was.
And were you observing or listening to anything else before or after that injunction hearing?
After, I did observe a Facebook Live video from one of the organizers who had ordered the truckers in general to stop the horns due to the injunction being put in place.
So what exactly, you were watching something online? What was
Yes,
that?
it was a Facebook Live video, I believe, from Chris Barber, if I'm not mistaken, though I can't be sure as to which organizer specifically it was, but they had been laughing about our lack of sleep and something about giving us a break from all the noise.
What did that live stream person, what did they say about the injunction? Do you recall?
They had said that I remember they were saying like, stop the horns, stop the noise.
And did you hear any, did you notice or observe any connection with that statement on the live stream video and what was going on outside?
Yes, shortly after the video, the horns had subsided, and it was like just sort of thinking back to it, it's hard to not be a little dramatic, but it really was like, it was like this respite that had came, and it was significant, the silence that was present for some time.
You were following or observing some of the social media of some of the protest organizers?
Yes.
After the injunction was obtained, you told us about listening to a social media stream on that date. Did you hear or observe any other social media streams by Convoy organizers speaking about the injunction after February the 7th?
Yes, I do recall after the first video, I don't recall exactly when this occurred, but the first video, I believe that the organizer had believed that it's hard to say because there was a lot of just words being spilled, but there was something about that we, not necessarily myself or the lawyers involved, or it was a general reference, I think, to like the city or the government or just the opposition, really, that they were going to give in to some demands. But after some time had passed, they had realized that no demands were being given, and to, like, I don't remember the exact words, but there was a call to action to like just let her rip.
And let what rip?
The horns.
And after observing that, did you notice any difference in the horns out on the street?
Yes, I did notice that there were some, I remember very distinctly, there were some confused horns, because really it sounds sort of crazy to attribute these kinds of descriptions to horns, but whereas before they were sure, I think, and like resounding, these were confused, almost as if, do I do it? Do I not do it? Do I do it? Do I not do it? There was a little bit more hesitation in the honking.
And Ms. Li, just a final couple questions. When you talked about measuring the decibel levels, where were you measuring that? Was that on the street or was it in your home?
I had measured in reference to the decibel levels I had described, it was inside of my home, though I had taken some on the streets where it was much louder, closer to 100 or more.
Yeah. And your apartment, don't tell us which floor, but is it above or below a 10th floor?
It is above a 10th floor.
Thank you. You told us a bit about bonfires, seeing bonfires. We're unsure if we'll get any evidence about this from the Ottawa Police, but just from what your observations were, what were the bonfires like?
They definitely varied depending on the location that you went. There were quite a few of them. Some were small and just for warmth. Others were larger for, I think there was a pig, like a whole pig being roasted. And I think it was under a fire, but I can't be certain about that. But there was that. And there were several bonfires down Wellington Street, oftentimes on corners and intersections where there were people huddled around it, often accompanied by signs and flags.
Thank you. And then finally, you responded to a question from Ottawa Police Council about that you had expressed or were thankful that the police were managing the situation. What situation did you feel that they were managing?
I felt that they were managing my personal safety correctly.
And what about out on the streets? Did you think they were managing it from your observation?
No, I did not.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does Commission Council have any brief follow-up?
No re-exam, thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank both witnesses for their coming forward to the commission and for their evidence. The commission appreciates you coming forward. I also want to thank counsel for the parties. It was very disciplined cross-examination, a very good start. So we thank you both, and you're now relieved of your obligations. And Mr. someone can come forward and assist Madame Delaronde to,
Thank you, Commissioner.
okay, thank you.
Sorry?
While the witnesses leave, this may be a good moment to take the break, and we'll come back after the break. Will take 15 minutes, and when we come back, we'll proceed with the second panel.